Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to talk to you. This morning, my congratulations go to the new president and new general secretary of the IMF. The true IMF, I used to say, because I talk a bit about the other IMF in Washington, and that is a different kind of beast than the IMF that is located in Geneva. Yeah. What I'm going to do this morning is to talk indeed about what Bertolt Huber has mentioned already, the globalization and the crisis of globalization. And indeed what we see today is a crisis of globalization. It is not just a crisis of financial markets, but it's a crisis of globalization, and it's a crisis, as the General Secretary has said, of neoliberalism of the last 30 years. This is the fundamental approach that we have to take if we want to understand what was going on. Because the collapse, the near collapse of the global economic system that we see today, that we face today, that challenges us today, is indeed not a collapse that was brought about by the enemies of the system, by the enemies of a globalized economy, by the enemies of a market economy. It was friendly fire. It was friendly fire that brought the system close to collapse. It was the neoliberal ideas that were not valid, the neoliberal ideas that were not sustainable, that brought the system close to collapse. And, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the first time. But this time we have to draw much stronger lessons. We have to conclude much clearer that it was a systemic crisis. And this systemic crisis should not repeat, because we see the damage that this global crisis brings all around the world, mostly to countries that have no blame to take this time for being responsible for this crisis, as has been seemingly the case in the past crisis in Asia or Latin America or elsewhere. This time, the crisis clearly originated in the industrialized country. The crisis originated in the role model of the globalized economies, namely those economies that were taken as the most liberal, as the most free, as the most deregulated, and it has shown that the system cannot work on its own. This is the important lesson. And if you, can we go to the PowerPoint presentation? Don't worry, I'm not going to take you through a whole PowerPoint presentation. I just want to show one or two slides to show what is my main message. My main message is today that the market, indeed, as it was constructed and it was liberalized, the markets were not able to do what is expected from markets. Namely, the markets, and in particular the financial markets, they didn't get the prices right. They didn't get the prices right. They got the prices systematically wrong. And this asks for government intervention, and much stronger government intervention than is envisaged in London, for example, at the G20 meeting. I come back to that in a minute. And this is the paradox, the paradox and the main puzzle that has emerged from this crisis is that if you look back, say, 15, 20 years, then it was the so-called Washington consensus coming from the other IMF again in Washington that said getting the prices right is what all countries in the world have to do. Getting the prices right by liberalization, by deregulating the markets, by letting capital flow to all countries freely without any restriction, that would get you the prices right, that would produce global welfare, that would increase growth rates, and so on. This has been shown to be fundamentally wrong. This is fundamentally wrong. The financial markets did not get the prices right, they got the prices wrong. This is the strong message I think we should take from this crisis, and we should force our politicians to think hard about it, because it seems that they're not willing to do so at this moment of time. And as I said, if you look at the G20 communique, it mentions some things, and Bertolt Huber said it mentioned that no market should be supervised or unregulated, but the language is very weak. The language is extremely weak, and we see that the casinos are still open. We see the casinos, all the casinos that I'm going to mention are still open, and the the gamblers are back in these casinos. The gamblers are back every day. Look at the stock markets in the first quarter of this year. Look at the commodity prices. Look at the oil price. The oil price went up back from 35 to 60. Why is that? Is it because of additional activity? Is it because of additional demand for oil in the deepest crisis of the global economy that we have seen for 50 years? No, definitely not. It is clearly speculative activity. The speculation is back. And the speculation is back in those countries where the currencies have been devalued some time ago. Now the currencies are going back up. So we have all the doors to the casinos are still open. All the doors are still open, and our politicians did not dare to close them. Our politicians only have said up to now, well, now if you enter the casino, you have to show your ID card, but nothing else. And this is not enough. This is definitely not enough. And I show you some examples. I hope this works. As I said, I'm not going through my presentation. It's based on a report that you can download from the UNCTAD homepage. It's called The Economic Crisis and Systemic Failures. We go through several markets. We show that in all the markets we had speculative activity. And what I want to show you really, that is why I'm rushing through all this. Don't mind, I hope I get to it rather quickly. What is important is that in this financial crisis, we have seen decoupling of the financial markets from the goods markets. And we have seen that all countries in the world are closely connected. In the first round, everybody said, oh, it's just a crisis of industrialized countries. But then we saw, no, it's not a crisis of the industrialized countries. It's indeed a global crisis. All the developing countries, and you see that here in the, if you can read it, I hope. No, you can't. It's stock market prices in developing countries, and it's the spread of developing countries, the bond spread of developing countries on the right-hand side that show how closely connected the countries are. And it even leads to the paradox result, to the absolute paradox result, that the spread shows it that developing countries, as I said, that are not to blame for nothing in this crisis, have been hit harder than those countries where the crisis originated. This is the logic and the philosophy of today's global market. You have a crisis coming clearly from the industrialized countries, but the spreads are going up in developing countries. Why is it? Because all the investors, so-called investors, you better should call them gamblers in the world, are going out of any kind of risky position. They're going out of any kind of risky position, and they're going back to safe havens. And the safe haven, although the crisis originated there, is the United States and Europe.